And so, hello there, welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spy Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm talking about my experience at the BFI Film Festival, and I'm reviewing a couple of films which I've seen at the BFI Film Festival so far. I'm going to be doing another podcast like this within the next couple of days because I haven't seen all of the movies I've booked to see at the BFI Film Festival yet, but I have seen a good few, which I'm going to be reviewing in today's podcast. And those films I'm reviewing are Conclave, Blitz, and the documentary Elton John, Never Too Late. But just before I get into my views of those films, I want to quickly say, if you can't tell already, my voice isn't the best today. I don't know why, but my voice is going. Even so, I haven't recorded a video in what feels like a couple of days. My voice is not on top form right now, so hopefully you guys can still hear me well. And I do apologise. I can't help it. It's just the way my voice is there. Occasionally it comes back, so maybe it'll come back at some point during this podcast today, but who knows? And also, I should address the fact that I am not in my usual environment. Usually when I'm recording a review or recording a podcast, I am in my bedroom. But of course, I'm not. I am in a Travelodge in London because I'm at the BFI Film Festival. So this is where I am right now. It's a bit of a dull background. I do apologise, but it was either that or a very messy room, which I don't really want to show you guys, that I'm staying in with my brother. So yeah, I'm recording this in a Travelodge, and that's why the setting is all a bit different. Currently in London, seeing the sights. I went to the Leicester Square Odeon today, which I've never been to before, which was a real treat. And being at the BFI Film Festival, which is also a real treat. So first, before I give my views of the movies that I'm reviewing in today's podcast, I'm going to talk a bit about my experience at the BFI Film Festival this year so far. It's been great. It's been really, really great. I love watching films with a huge audience. I don't get to do that where I'm from. The cinema I'm from, usually when I go to the cinema, the audience, well, there's not many people in the cinema. The cinema's normally like a third full, if that. So it's really great watching a film with a huge audience. I've been seeing some stars, which is also great. And earlier today, I went to a talk with Denis Villeneuve, and the talk was hosted by Brett Goldstein. So Brett Goldstein, if you don't know, probably most famous for playing Roy Kent in Ted Lasso. He's a famous British comedian, and he's also written on such shows as Shrinking, which is coming back soon as a very underrated show. He was there doing the talk. He was very funny. Denis Villeneuve, if you don't recognise her name, he's directed such movies as Dune Part 1 and 2. He directed The Prisoners, Sicario, Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, and the list goes on and on and on. He's directed many brilliant movies, and getting to hear him talk about cinema was quite something. Even so, I'm not the biggest fan of Dune Part 2, which I know is a very unpopular opinion. Even so, I'm not the biggest fan of that movie. Getting to hear him talk about film in a way that was so engrossing. You know, he's someone who's so passionate about movies, and he said at one point that his English wasn't great because he's not from the UK, or he's not from the US. His English isn't the best. I don't know where he's originally from. I do apologise. I've looked that up, but he's not originally from the UK. English isn't his first language, and you couldn't tell. You know, at one point he said, "Oh, my English isn't the best." That was my terrible Denis Villeneuve impression, but he spoke so eloquently that I absolutely loved it. So yeah, even though I'm not the biggest on his movies, I'm going to admit, he is a very interesting filmmaker, and getting to hear him talk about movies was just, like I said before, engrossing. And Brett Goldstein was absolutely hilarious, and clearly Brett Goldstein was a fan of Denis Villeneuve, so that made the interview and the talk that much better. I was quite high up, so I didn't get to see them too up close, but in the hall that I was in when I was watching the interview, I had a blast. So that was what I did earlier today. But I've been here since Thursday afternoon slash evening, and since then I've seen 4 movies, but I'm only going to review 3 of those films in today's podcast, and a podcast later in the week I'll probably review the next 3 movies that I'm seeing, or that one of the movies I've already seen at the film festival, but the other 2 movies I'm seeing tomorrow. But the 3 movies that I've already said that I'm reviewing in today's podcast are Conclave, which I think is coming out late November, Blitz, which I think is coming out early November, and Elton John, Never Too Late, which I think is coming out on Disney Plus in early December. So let's talk about Conclave first of all. Again, my voice is really not the best right now, so do bear with me and hopefully you guys can still hear what I'm saying. So Conclave, according to Google, is releasing worldwide on the 29th of November. And this is a new film directed by Edward Berger. And if you don't recognise his name, Edward Berger most recently directed the German remake of All Quiet on the Western Front, which was on Netflix. That movie was excellent. So just mind-bogglingly good in my opinion. And this film, Conclave, stars the likes of Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, Isabella Rossellini, and John Lithgow. So you got quite a good cast. And with that cast and with Edward Berger directing, I was very excited to see this movie. And it's also been getting some Oscar buzz. There's some film pundits I follow online have been calling this a potential Best Picture win. I'm like, okay, you have me all in. And the Google plot synopsis for this film goes as follows. Cardinal Lawrence, played by Ralph Fiennes in the movie, is tasked with one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, participating in the selection of a new pope. Surrounded by powerful religious leaders in the halls of the Vatican, he soon uncovers a trail of deep secrets that could shake the very foundation of the Roman Catholic Church. And that's pretty much all you need to know about Conclave before seeing it. And honestly, I hate to start my reviews on the films I've seen at the BFI Film Festival this year on a downer, but this film wasn't for me. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's a bad movie at all. It's beautifully made, very well directed. The performances are all phenomenal. I can see some Best Actor nominations, particularly with Ralph Fiennes and John Lithgow. However, the film for me wasn't gripping enough, wasn't suspenseful enough, and it didn't give me a reason to care about its central characters. I sat there through most of the movie not really caring about what was going on. And that's not to say it doesn't have its moments. It certainly does. There are some funny moments in there which were intentional. There were a couple of unintentional funny moments as well because there were subtitles in my screening, and the subtitles were literally for every single thing that happened. So if there's a loud noise in the film, the subtitles came up loud noise or loud ominous noise, and then if the score started to build up, it said score crescendo. So it was quite funny, that for me personally. And there were some, intentionally funny moments in there as well. And there was a surprise twist which I didn't see coming, which really shocked me. And I don't think anyone else will see it coming as well. But I found the film to be a tad on the silly side, and it didn't give me lots to think about once I left the cinema. Like, all the other movies I watched at the film festival so far, I've thought about quite a bit more after seeing. I almost forgot I saw this movie when I was writing my notes for my reviews. I almost forgot. Because it didn't give me a lot to think about. And the film's about 2 hours long, and I felt if it was shorter, and I'm not saying load short, but I felt if it was shorter, it could have been sharper and more effective, but the film dragged for me, and I did leave feeling disappointed. It's not for me. And I'm going to give it a rating of 5 out of 10, but I don't feel that rating is fair, because again, it's not for me. I can see a lot of people getting something out of this movie. It's getting great reviews, and I understand why. I watched this with my brother who loved it. So, again, a lot of people are going to get something out of it. It's going to be an Oscar contender, and understandably so. I just struggled with it personally, and it wasn't my kind of movie. So I'm giving it a 5 out of 10, but I don't feel it's a fair rating, just because it wasn't for me. So yeah, that was my first review that was the first film. No, it wasn't the first film I saw at the film festival actually, but it's the first film that I'm reviewing at the film festival because I want to get it over with. I want to get the negative stuff over with, and I want to get to the positive stuff. Because also yesterday I saw Blitz. So Blitz is releasing in the UK on November the 1st, so not too long away. And this is the newest film from Steve McQueen. No, not that Steve McQueen from The Great Escape. The Steve McQueen who directed such films as 12 Years a Slave, which is fantastic, Widows, which I wasn't a big fan of, I got to admit. I really wanted to love that movie, but I didn't get along with it, and Shame, which I haven't seen amongst many other films. God, my voice is getting quite bad right now. Almost knocked a mug over. My voice is getting quite bad when I so have a quick drink. So yeah, this is a new film from Steve McQueen, and it stars Saoirse Ronan in the lead role, alongside supporting performances from Harris Dickinson, Paul Weller and Stephen Graham, and there's a kid in the film who is played by Elliot Heffernan. And the Google Plus synopsis of Blitz goes as follows. In World War II London, 9-year-old George, played by Elliot Heffernan in the film, is evacuated to the countryside by his mother, Rita, played by Saoirse Ronan in the film, to escape the bombings. Defiant and determined to return to his family, George embarks on a journey back home as Rita searches for him. And that's pretty much all I need to know about this film before seeing it. And I went into this film thinking it was going to be slow, drawn out, and that it was going to be emotionally affecting, for sure, because it's Steve McQueen and he's a very good director and he's good at doing that, you know. But I wasn't expecting it. I was expecting it to be a history lesson, if I'm being completely frank. I was going into the film thinking, I'll get through it, but it might be a very long 2 hours, like Conclave was. And I saw this after Conclave, so I wasn't in the best of moods. And I was like, oh God, I'll get through it, just about. And I was thinking there's going to be this history lesson that just moved at a very slow pace. Boy, was I wrong. This movie is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And it moves along at a brisk pace. Nothing feels unimportant in this movie. Everything feels necessary. And this film does a great job at showing you the horrors of the Blitz. It's a harrowing watch at times, but it's also thrilling and it's suspenseful and it's intense in the way I kind of wanted Conclave to be. I got it Conclave there, didn't I? But in the way I wanted Conclave to be. It's also uplifting at times and it's heartwarming, but it's very heartbreaking as well. And it's one of those films which was just so engaging. I was hooked into this movie from start to finish, and I was surprised how into it I was. And I'm not saying the film is perfect. I do feel there are things which could have been improved. Harris Dickinson's role, I felt was going to amount to more, and it didn't in the film. He's very good in it, but I just felt it was going to amount to more. And I felt the ending could have been better. So if you can hear some surrounded things, by the way, I think someone's just walking past the room. But I did admire it so much for what it was, at showing you the horrors of the Blitz. Like, the film's called Blitz, and you genuinely feel when you're watching it like the Blitz is taking place. There are sequences which are nail-biting and in the way you want something like this to be, and it does not feel like a history lesson at all. It really doesn't. This feels like a story that Steve McQueen wanted to tell, and it's an informative story. It's a story from the perspective that we haven't really seen before. I loved that about it. I loved how it felt personal to Steve McQueen. I don't know if it is, by the way, but it felt like it was. And the performances were all brilliant. Saoirse Ronan, is she bad at anything? I don't think so. And she is just terrific, because she plays a Brit in this film, and she has a British accent, but in reality, I think she's from Ireland. Yeah, she's from Ireland. And you couldn't tell. Yeah, she is phenomenal. As is the kid. I didn't think the kid was phenomenal, but I thought he was good at what he was doing. I believed in him. There's great supporting performances from Harris Dickinson, as what he mentioned. Stephen Graham as a role in the film, which I didn't know about, and Stephen Graham was He plays a character you do not like, and he plays it very well. And I came out of the film and looked at my brother and was like, wow, that was powerful. And we both were kind of speechless, you know. Now that I look back at it, we didn't actually say anything to each other for like 5 minutes coming out of the cinema. It was quite something, because it is a very powerful movie that leaves you with a lot to think about and a lot to stomach, and it hooks you from the beginning and doesn't let go of that hook. It's a really great movie that I can't recommend enough when it comes out in cinemas. I'm probably going to watch it again when it comes out in cinemas, because it's emotionally heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time, and really beautifully directed. The score is apparently by Hans Zimmer, which I just found out when I looked up on Google. So yeah, there you go. And I thought it was actually a very different Hans Zimmer score, which was a nice surprise. If you asked me, put it this way, if you asked me this was a score, if you asked me if Hans Zimmer scored this film, I wouldn't have said he did. And I mean that in the best way. Sometimes Hans Zimmer scores all sound the same to me. This one didn't, and I thought the score was brilliant and really brought the atmosphere of the film to life in a way that I really didn't expect. Yes, remarkable film. I loved it. Very powerful, very thrilling, and a hard watch, but a satisfying watch at the same time. I thought it was, well, I already said it, but I'm going to say it again. I thought it was brilliant. And so I'm going to say that Blitz, I'm going to say it's a 9 out of 10. Yeah, there isn't much I'd change about the film, and watching the cinema, at times I felt like I was in the Blitz alongside these characters, which is, I think, high praise enough. And also, one last thing I want to mention about this, just look to my notes, last thing I want to mention about Blitz is it does a great job of bringing World War II London during the Blitz to life. You actually believe you're watching London during World War II and that the Blitz are taking place. The production design and set design and all that jazz is really, it's on screen in the way you want it to be. So yeah, Blitz is a 9 out of 10 from me. And now we're going to the final film that I'm reviewing in today's podcast, which is Elton John Never Too Late, the new Elton John documentary, which, according to IMDb, is releasing in the US on December the 13th, but it doesn't say UK release date. I did a bit of looking, but I must admit I didn't do loads of looking because, I'm quite exhausted right now, but I did do a bit of looking, and I couldn't find a UK release date for this film. It will get a UK release. I mean, I'm almost certain of it. I don't want to be shocked if it's the same as a US release. I bet it releases in December on Disney+, but I don't know that for certain. So, for now, I'm going to say releases December, and I'm a big Elton John fan. A very big Elton John fan. Some of his songs are in my, top 20 songs, maybe top 10 songs of all time. He's one of my favourite artists. I'd probably say I listen to him daily, if not daily, at least every other day. His songs mean so much to me. And I got to see him live about a year ago, a year and a half ago actually, which was a real treat. And I got to see him again in person yesterday, a couple rows away from him in the cinema, which was also a real treat. Hearing him intro the film and saying, he said this, which I thought was very interesting and fitting now I've seen the movie, now I've seen the documentary. He said, this is perhaps a documentary you might not want to see, but it is a documentary of my life that I wanted to see. And I think that pretty much sums it up, because in the documentary, the film mainly tells the story of Elton John's rise to fame in the 70s and the build-up to his performance at Dodge Stadium, which happened in 2022 as part of his Goodbye Yellow Brick Road farewell tour, which is where I saw him live. I saw him in Manchester during that tour. And this film, I went into not with high expectations because it's been getting some sniffy reviews. I need to stop reading reviews because this film was just wonderful. This was such a great introduction to me to the BFI Film Festival, because this was the first film I saw as part of the film festival. I came off quite a long travel up to London. I was quite tired. I was like, okay, let's go to this screening of Elton John, Never Too Late. Wasn't expecting much. And I came out of the film going, that was what I wanted from that movie. It's a celebration of Elton John's life, and it doesn't go into his struggles too much. Like, it does cover them. It does cover his how should I say this? His strained relationship with his manager. It does cover his drug issues, and it does cover other problems he had in his life. But it's mainly a celebration of his music, of where he's come from, and how he's managed to stay in the spotlight and stay relevant for all these years. And I really liked it for that. And it does show an intimate side to Elton John as well, which I hadn't seen before. Like, there's all the stuff that's going on in quote-unquote present day. It's not really present day, last year or 2022. But there's all this stuff going on in the documentary where you see Elton John preparing for his performance at Dodge Stadium as part of his farewell tour. And you see him interacting with his kids. And you see him talking about his kids. And those are the most emotional parts of the film, because they showed a side to him which I hadn't seen before, really. Because at one point in the documentary he's saying, I don't know if I'm going to be there for the kid's big moment. I don't know if I'm going to be there when my kid gets married. And I was like, wow, I never thought of it like that. And it showed a real side to Elton, and him talking to his band that he performed with on the farewell tour that he also performed with in the 70s. Yeah, I really liked all that stuff, and I thought the most fascinating part of the film, especially as a big Beatles fan, was the section which is all about Elton John's relationship with John Lennon and how they perform live, and how their performance, not to go into too many spoilers because I don't want to give anything away in case you're thinking about watching this documentary, but their performance, John Lennon and Elton John's joint performance, basically brought John Lennon back to Yoko, and because of that, they had the kid together. They had Sean Lennon. So that was a real fascinating part of the documentary that I was hooked into. And the documentary is a satisfying watch. I've heard some people say it's a thin portrait of his life, and I mean, perhaps it is, but it gave me enough information that I felt satisfied. I mean, I will say it's slightly contradictory. I don't know if I pronounce that word correctly. It contradicts, this is what I'm trying to say, it contradicts the Elton John biopic Rocket Man in some parts, and I was wondering which one is true. Is it Rocket Man or is it this film? I'm going to guess it's this film, because one thing I haven't said, actually, I can't believe I forgot to say this. This film is co-directed by Elton John's husband, David Furnish, and and R.G. Cutler, who isn't married to Elton John, obviously, but Elton John's husband is a co-director on this movie. So I imagine this is probably the most accurate telling of the story, because although Elton John was attached to the producer on Rocket Man, he didn't direct it, nor did his husband. That film was directed by Dexter Fletcher. A little bit of information there that wasn't really needed. Anyway, I imagine this is more accurate, but there was some contradictory, again, I think I'm pronouncing that word wrong. There were some parts of this film which contradicted, am I pronouncing that? I can't. I'm so tired right now. Been a very long day. There were some parts of the film which contradicted the biopic, and that was a bit surprising. And I will say, if you haven't seen the biopic, then there is stuff. If you've seen the biopic, there is stuff. A familiar ground is tread. That's what I'll say. Familiar ground is tread. But there's also enough new information that I didn't know, and there's some great archival footage of Elton John starting to play like Tiny Dancer or Candle in the Wind, or there's another song I'm forgetting off the top of my head right now that's done in the film. Anyway, there's some great moments where you see him just performing these songs for the first time. There's a brilliant moment where he does Tiny Dance for the first time. It's like Bernie Taupin's the person he writes, pardon me, the lyrics for all of his songs, like Bernie wrote this about his girlfriend, and then he just starts playing Tiny Dance, and you're like, wow. Anyway, I loved all that stuff, and I thought the documentary was just wonderful. It was satisfying, it was exciting, it was fascinating, particularly the John Lennon stuff as a big Beatles fan, and hearing and seeing a very different side to Elton John, which was also a big treat. And one last thing that I wanted to mention about the documentary is it shows how much he is an advocate of new and upcoming artists. You know, there's a section of the documentary where you see him play. He's got like his own radio station, I think, and he's playing all these new artists' music, which I thought was, again, wonderful, because I got the impression that not many artists his age do that, and yet he's doing it, and he's giving them an opportunity that perhaps they wouldn't get on other, radio stations, more popular radio stations that are around today. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed the documentary. It's a very enjoyable watch. It's got some really great archival footage. There's a section about John Lennon, which I know I said before, but I'm going to say again, it's fascinating, truly fascinating. Probably the best part of the documentary. Again, big Beatles fan, so maybe I'm a bit biased there. And there is just so much that if you're an Elton John fan, you can't help but enjoy it. I'm surprised getting snippy reviews because I thought it was brilliant. I would have liked to cover again, this is the last thing I'll say. I know I said that before, but this is the last thing I'll say. It doesn't really cover his work during the 90s, the early 2000s, and the 2010s too much. But all the stuff leading up to his performance at Dodge Stadium as part of his farewell tour was enough for me that it did make a complete story. I mean, it leaves some stuff out, but it made a complete story that all the stuff in the 70s and all the stuff over the past couple of years made it all feel like a complete story that made me leave the cinema with a huge grin on my face. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed Elton John and Never Too Late, and that's why I'm going to give it. Yeah, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. There's not much I would add to this documentary. I perhaps in the future like to do a documentary about his work during the 90s to early 2000s and 2010s, but this documentary isn't about that, and I thought that was fine. It's about his rise to fame, and it's about his the build up to his performance at Dodge Stadium, which was part of his farewell tour, and that was all enough for me. That was all compelling enough, and yeah, I'm going to round things off because you can tell I'm starting to lose it. I thought it was wonderful, really, truly wonderful. So, as I said before, I'm going to say once more, Elton John Never Too Late is an 8.5 out of 10 for me. And that's it for today's podcast. Hopefully my voice not being great hasn't got in the way of the podcast too much, and hopefully you still enjoy watching this podcast. And if you have seen it in the movies, if you're also at the BFI Film Festival right now, please let me know your thoughts on those films. Or if you're watching this in the future, once these films are released on whatever platform, cinemas, streaming, whatever, please let me know your thoughts on the films as well. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. And look forward to many more podcasts coming very soon on this channel. As we said, thank you so much for watching or listening, and I suppose this is it, so I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now, bye!